Good morning. I was wondering how many people like me made the bad decision of staying around Washington in August, and we now have the answer to that. So I really appreciate all of you joining us here today. My name is Josh Freed. I am the Senior Vice President for Climate and Energy here at Third Way, and really appreciate all of you joining us as we mark the second anniversary this Friday of the signing of the Inflation Reduction Act with John Podesta, who's the Senior Advisor to the President for International Climate Policy. It's been 2 years since the enactment of the Inflation Reduction Act, and the Biden-Harris administration and their officials over those 2 years have really used one phrase more than almost any other to describe it: government-enabled and private sector-led. That's because the administration and the IRA's lead author in the Senate, Senator Joe Manchin, recognized that addressing climate change required three critical elements. First, significant investment in clean energy to show that it is a national priority and to make clean energy cheap and abundant. Second, restoring American leadership as an industrial powerhouse built with good-paying jobs and union labor. And third, private sector leadership to multiply government investment, innovation, and deployment here in the United States. This vision is quintessentially American, a partnership between the public sector and the private sector to act on urgent national interest, just as we did during the Cold War, the space race, and development of the internet. And President Biden understood that we simply were never going to address climate change by trying to make gas more expensive. The only path was to make clean energy cheap. And that approach, done correctly, would also have the crucial benefit of allowing America to lead both in the short term by producing the oil and gas that we need, and in the long term by inventing and building the clean energy technologies that the world must have going forward. The progress, though gradual, is undeniable. New, good-paying union jobs, manufacturing returning to American shores, more than $110 billion in private capital invested in just 2 years, almost $4 for every dollar the federal government is investing. That is why we at Third Way, as a centrist organization, are such enthusiastic supporters of the Inflation Reduction Act. And look, it is not the Green New Deal. It is setting a direction that empowers companies to build and boldly manufacture and deploy every type of clean energy we need. As you'll hear in a moment, it is unleashing the best of the private sector, the ability to leverage large sums of private capital, innovate and move quickly to deploy technologies and projects, and scale, with the leadership of the federal government to take on three enormous challenges: address climate change, reduce energy costs, and compete with China. And these are three national interests that, left alone, the markets would not address on their own. And if we pair those actions with permitting reform for transmission and for deploying more clean energy projects, we will be able to not only meet this moment, but lead well into the future. You'll hear a lot more about this in a moment, and it is rare, but often used to describe someone as needing no introduction. And we are very happy and fortunate to have someone today who truly does need no introduction. We're thrilled to have John Podesta join us to really mark the second anniversary, so I'll welcome John to the stage. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Josh. Josh has an excuse for being here in August. He's taking his son to college. I don't know about the rest of us. We'll have to figure that out. I want to thank Third Way for hosting today's event, and I want to thank Josh and Matt and the whole Third Way team for years of advocacy for a clean energy future. It's great to be here with all of you. We're gathering, of course, during a summer that's been defined by the climate crisis. July 21st for those of you who weren't paying attention, was the hottest day ever recorded by humans in history. That record lasted for 1 day because July 22nd was hotter still. The consequence of a rapidly warming planet aren't just about the loss of faraway places like the Great Barrier Reef or the ice sheets of Greenland and Antarctica. It's about the daily impact on people's lives, from Hurricane Beryl and Tropical Storm Debbie that have already pummeled the Gulf and East Coast this summer, to the extreme heat affecting workers in the Southwest, to the wildfires that are raging in California and the West. To combat this existential threat, President Biden and Vice President Harris set a bold vision to build a clean energy economy by creating good-paying union jobs and spreading opportunity to every corner of America. And 2 years ago, they took the biggest step yet to turn that vision into a reality by passing and signing the Inflation Reduction Act. That law makes the largest investment in climate and clean energy, not only in the history of America, but in the history of the world. It tackles climate pollution in every economic sector: power, transportation, buildings, industry, agriculture, and forestry. And it does all this by investing in workers, communities, and families. The IRA invests in workers by catalyzing a clean energy boom that's creating good-paying union jobs all across America. I won't disappoint Josh by noting that the law does this with a government-enabled but private sector-led approach, providing 10-plus years of certainty through expanded and enhanced clean energy tax credits, signaling to businesses that they can think big and make long-term decisions. Treasury guidance is now available on 21 of the 24 tax credit provisions. That's given the private sector the certainty it needed to announce more than $415 billion in new clean energy investments since President Biden and Vice President Harris took office. $265 billion of that investment's been announced since the Inflation Reduction Act passed. And since that date, just 2 years ago this week, there have been, according to independent study, more than 300,000 jobs created as a result of the passage of that act. President Biden and Vice President Harris are working to make sure those are good-paying jobs that you can support a family on, jobs that offer a free and fair chance to join a union and the right to organize and bargain collectively. The IRA effectively makes strong labor standards an offer the private sector can't refuse by providing 5 times the value of tax credits when developers pay prevailing wages and hire registered apprenticeships. In addition to investing in workers, the IRA is aiming to build more clean energy in the right places by investing in underserved communities. Woven into the fabric of the law's tax credits are game-changing incentives for companies to invest in low-income communities and traditional energy communities, the people who have kept the lights on and kept our manufacturing powered for more than a century. And those investments are working. According to the Treasury analysis, since the IRA passed, 75% of clean energy investments have been in counties with lower than medium household incomes. Clean energy investments in traditional energy communities have doubled in the past 2 years. And federal dollars are directly flowing into communities through the grant side of the law as well. $118 billion of grants, loans, and rebates in the law are considered covered programs under President Biden's Justice 40 initiative, which aims to ensure that 40% of the benefits of specific federal programs flow to disadvantaged communities. Federal agencies have already awarded nearly 2/3 of all available grant, loan, and rebate funding, and of the grant dollars that can be spent this year, 84% have been awarded or are pending through a notice of funding opportunity. Some big examples are EPA's $27 billion Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which made awards this spring, and $4.3 billion in climate pollution reduction grants they announced last month that are going to states and cities to build their own bottom-up reductions in climate pollution. In March, DOE announced awards across 20 states through the Industrial Demonstration Program, the largest investment in clean manufacturing in U.S. history. HUD is now awarded 70% of its IRA funds through the Green and Resilient Retrofit Program, which translates to more than 20,000 cost-saving home energy upgrades for seniors and low-income families. That brings me to the third category of people benefiting from the Inflation Reduction Act, American families. Through the law's consumer programs, families are already saving money on solar panels, EV heat pumps, and more, helping them to save hundreds or even thousands of dollars a year on energy. Since January 2024, more than 250,000 Americans have claimed the IRA's EV tax credits, saving about $1.5 billion. Nearly all of those buyers claimed the incentive at the point of sale. That is, the dealer was able to reduce that purchase price by up to $7,500. Families in New York and as of last week, Wisconsin can get rebates off electric appliances and energy efficiency improvements at home, and more states will launch their programs later this summer and fall. 22 states are in line to receive that funding for their full participation, and more to follow. Last week, the Treasury Department and the IRS released the first public data on the IRA's consumer clean energy tax incentives. The new analysis shows that in 2023, more than 3.4 million American families benefited from $8.4 billion in tax credits to lower the cost of clean energy and energy efficiency upgrades to their homes. That's millions of Americans that are now saving money every month on their energy bills, on top of the millions of Americans whose communities are benefiting from the IRA grant dollars or seeing new clean energy projects bringing good paying jobs and opportunities to their hometowns. Have we solved every challenge facing the clean energy economy? Of course not. But the bottom line is this. 2 years in, the largest climate investment in history is working. So understandably, people are asking if that investment can really stick, regardless of who's in power in Washington. My answer to the question of whether the Inflation Reduction Act has staying power is unquestionably yes. No Republicans voted for the Inflation Reduction Act, but they know their constituents are receiving the benefits. According to Climate Power, 58% of the new clean energy jobs created since the IRA passed are located in congressional districts represented by Republicans. Those jobs come from over 300 new clean energy projects totaling $282 billion in investment. Some Republicans, especially governors, know that all of this activity is actually a good thing. Take Governor Kevin Stitt of Oklahoma. Today he's celebrating the end of construction in his state for the largest direct air capture facility in America. Last week, Governor Gianforte of Montana applauded a $700 million investment from the Department of Energy, funded by the bipartisan infrastructure law, for the North Plains Connector Transmission Power Project that will link 3 regional grids and boost clean power capacity across that whole region. Governor Henry McMaster of South Carolina has welcomed clean energy investment for many years, from the EV supply chain to the Columbia Solar Inverter Facility by Enphase and Flex that President Biden and I visited last summer. And last week, 18 House Republicans wrote a letter to Speaker Mike Johnson urging him not to repeal the IRA's energy tax credit. The letter says prematurely repealing energy tax credits, and I'm quoting, particularly those which were used to justify the investments that already broke ground, would undermine private investments, stop development that is already ongoing. A full repeal would create a worst-case scenario where we would have spent billions of taxpayer dollars and received next to nothing in return. In my view, these guys get it. But there are others who are trying to claw back jobs, raise costs, and take away opportunity and hoping the American people actually won't notice. In the past 2 years, House Republicans have attempted to repeal all or parts of the Inflation Reduction Act 42 times. Now, they're at it again in the latest round of federal appropriations bills for the next fiscal year. House Republicans pay lip service to clean air and clean water, but they're proposing the lowest funding levels for the EPA in over 25 years. Attempting to block EPA standards and programs to reduce pollution, from particulate matter to methane, and trying to slash funding for our national parks, the Arctic, clean energy on our public lands, and meeting our commitments to tribal nations. House Republicans say they care about jobs, but they're trying to prevent funds from being used for the American Climate Corps, which is already supporting 9,000 young people, serving their communities in climate and environmental jobs. House Republicans say they want to speed up permitting for infrastructure and private sector projects, but they're trying to prevent the Council on Environmental Quality from enforcing its updated NEPA rule, which actually implements the permitting efficiencies Congress directed them to make a little over a year ago. House Republicans say we should be tough on China, but they want to slash DOE funding that supports clean energy demonstration projects and the Loan Program Office, a key program that boosts Americans' competitiveness and gives us a leading edge over China. House Republicans say the prices are too high, but they're proposing to raise costs by preventing DOE from enforcing energy efficiency standards for home appliances, which are projected to save families nearly $73 billion on their utility bills over the next 30 years. And trying to divert money away from weatherization, which would prevent more than 55,000 low-income households from receiving assistance to reduce their energy costs. On top of all that, House Republicans have added riders on these appropriation bills that attempt to block the implementation of nearly every executive action on climate and clean energy that President Biden has taken. If that's not climate denial, I don't know what is. These attempts to undo our climate and environmental progress, including many of our bedrock environmental laws, will only take our country backward. They will hurt our economy and our communities. They will undermine the good work the Inflation Reduction Act is doing to build a clean energy economy across America. And they will send our efforts to rebuild clean energy manufacturing back overseas. It's why the White House issued veto threats last month for 4 of the House appropriations bills. President Biden and Vice President Harris will continue to fight these bad faith attempts to roll back the clock on our growing clean energy economy and undermine the fight against climate change. But they need your help. We need the private companies, many of whom are represented in this room, that are claiming IRA tax credits to tout the jobs they're creating, the investments you're making, and the facilities you're opening. Don't take it for granted that elected officials or the public know about the work you're doing. We need families that have already saved money on clean energy to tell their friends and neighbors how easy it is to access the IRA's consumer tax credits. You can visit EnergyStar.gov/home savings to learn more. And you can learn that by zip code. And we need elected officials from red and blue states alike to recognize the opportunity the law is bringing to their communities and to continue to embrace it. We're talking about 2 very different visions of the future, one that takes us forward, giving families more breathing room and bringing jobs and opportunity to every corner of America. The other takes us backwards, raising costs, killing jobs, stifling opportunity. It's up to every single one of us to move our collective work forward for the benefit of workers, communities, families, and of course, our planet. So thank you, and now thank you for listening to me. And now I'll invite Josh back up, and we're going to do a little bit of a Q&A.
Fantastic. Thank you. Here, we can just bring that. Fantastic. So I'm going to open with the question myself, and then we will turn it over momentarily to the audience for questions. The one thing we ask, because we do have a standing room only audience here, to get as many questions in as we can, is if you can keep your question brief and also open with an introduction just of who you are and what organization you're working for. So John, let's start off with, you covered a lot of ground which really shows how extensive the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law are in touching so many parts of the clean energy economy and jobs and on and on. Can you talk a little bit more about an issue near and dear to Third Way, which is how is the Inflation Reduction Act supporting a wide range of technologies and boosting innovation?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, Josh, and I think one of the things we're most excited about. But there are both direct investments. For example, one of the first things we did after I came back to the White House after the bill passed was to go out to Argonne National Labs, and we put $3 billion from the Inflation Reduction Act into clean energy development work through the national labs. But I think the biggest source of change really, again, comes back to the private sector through clean energy demonstration programs that are across a whole suite of technologies to the Loan Program Office, which is supporting startups, new companies, big companies, trying to change the trajectory on the cost curve for these innovative technologies. I mentioned that the Kevin Stitt in Oklahoma, that's the largest direct air capture program in North America. That's the kind of change that can happen based on the support that's coming from the Inflation Reduction Act. And some people are doubtful about some of these technologies, like direct air capture. Why shouldn't we just be trying to decarbonize our emitting sectors in the first place? Why are we pulling carbon out of the air? Well, the reality is the National Academy of Sciences did a study and analyzed that and suggested that by mid-century, in order to hit net zero, where we're taking as much carbon out of the atmosphere as we're putting into it, we need to be withdrawing and storing as much as 9 billion metric tons of carbon a year. Half of that can be done through natural systems, but we need to develop these technologies to make good on the promise that leaders and companies and others around the world have made to hit that net zero moment. I could go on and on in small modular reactors and in innovative technologies, in greening the industrial process, in grants that are going to make green steel, in the procurement efforts that are being led by GSA to make sure that building materials are cleaner. All of that is creating a virtuous cycle of innovation, of investment, of job creation, and cost reduction.
And we're not doing it alone either. We're competing against other countries, and so on direct air capture and other things, if we don't develop it and export it to the rest of the world, other countries, some of whom we're competing against on a wide variety of playing fields, will do it.
Well, look, I mentioned China in the speech.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that, for a variety of reasons, I think the president, the vice president all saw at the beginning that we had an economic, we're coming out of COVID, we have the supply chain challenge, et cetera, and they understood that we don't want this in the technologies of the future. Yeah. The semiconductor, invented in America, but now being produced overseas, which led to the passage of the Chips and Science Act. Clean energy technologies, which led to the passage of IRA. We've seen a boom in manufacturing, 6 straight quarters of growth coming into this month in manufacturing, the highest levels of manufacturing construction in the last 40 years. So that has dual benefits. I mean, it's a driver of strong economic growth in America, of job creation and the rest, putting people to work, making that spread across the country. But it also reduces our vulnerability to single source suppliers. And obviously, the Europeans felt that profoundly. Yes. When Russia invaded Ukraine, and they were heavily dependent on Russian fossil fuels to power their economy. We didn't want to be in the same position. We needed to work with our friends and partners to build both domestic sources of supply for manufacturing, to ensure that American workers got the benefit of that. They can outcompete anybody, but then to make sure that those supplies were secure, and that's what we're attempting to do. You know, all that is challenging in a world where the Chinese, for many, many years, the PRC decided that to target particularly these advanced clean energy technologies and used what we think of as both unfair methods to create overcapacity in a number of these sectors. And so we have some friction with our PRC colleagues these days, although I try to keep an open channel there too. But there's no question we were over-dependent, and we're beginning to reverse that across the whole value chain, from critical minerals to battery components to solar components to cells. We've had a boom in manufacturing of modules here, but we need to make sure that we have secure supply chains on the whole value chain.
Yeah. So if you have a question in the audience, if you could raise your hand. We have two people here who also have microphones, so we will bring the mic to you. We'll start in the front. Maxine.
Hi, thanks, Josh. Maxine Joslo at the Washington Post. I wanted to ask about oil production. The U.S. is now producing more oil and gas than it ever has and than any country ever has. How do you square that with the administration's ambitious climate commitments, including in the IRA, and how do you explain that to international climate negotiators at COPs?
Well, look, I think that this is a kind of market-driven phenomena, both on the oil and gas sector. On the gas side, I think it was important that we could supply particularly our friends and allies in Europe after the illegal invasion of Ukraine and the cutoff of Russian sources of supply. On the oil side, we continue to benefit from production, the effect that it has on stabilizing price around the world. We're seeing gas prices that I think are about 40 cents lower this summer than they were a year ago. But in the end of the day, we also have to transition away from fossil fuels. So that's a process that's not going to happen overnight. And I think we have to meet that challenge with sensible solutions. Ultimately, you know, it kind of depends on whether you believe the EIA or you believe our friends in Saudi about what the curve looks like on oil usage going forward. They predict that by the end of the decade, with the electrification of transportation, that we'll be seeing reduced demand for particularly for oil later in the 2030s, and reduced demand for gas. But the entire world agreed in Dubai that we need to transition away from fossil fuels. That's a project that's going to take place over the next decades. And in the meantime, I think we want to get the balance right so that benefits American consumers, but that keeps on the march for this strong levels of economic development that I described in the clean energy space.
So at the end.
Thanks, Josh. Ben Johansson, Politico. So Vice President Harris and Governor Walz have shied away from mentioning climate change on the campaign trail. In her time as VP, she's traveled the country and really touted the benefits of the IRA. So what kind of role do you think climate change and the investments from the IRA will play in the campaign? Do you think the Vice President should lean in towards the accomplishments, from the legislation on the trail?
Well, you know, I in my current job, I used to be able to talk about politics. I can't talk about politics as much anymore. But I would just note the fact that the vice president cast the tie-breaking vote to pass the largest investment in clean energy and attacking climate change in history. She's been a champion of a lot of the IRA. She helped build support for it, and she's been around the country in her official capacity talking about it. And then, you know, I think, as I noted, I think the level of investment that we've seen take place, and the level of job creation is something that I think the whole administration is proud of and should be proud of.
So, Professor Reamer.
Hi, Andrew Reamer, research professor at George Washington University and former contractor with Third Way on clean energy industrial strategy. An important way to move forward with clean energy, federal clean energy policies is to evaluate what's worked well and what hasn't worked so well and how it can be improved, so continuous improvement. Would you evaluate the process of evaluating what's going on, and how well is the government set up to do it? Is it using the foundations of evidence-based policymaking to create a framework for evaluating clean energy policy?
Well, I think both. You know, I've been talking about the Inflation Reduction Act. We have one of the things I think the administration has done is really used all the tools that it had available to it to try to take account of the science and move the country forward to reduce emissions. So this is true on the regulatory side as well as on the investment side. And yes, I think we're constantly evaluating what the effect is and where the biggest bang for the buck is. And then people can make better judgments about which interventions were the most cost effective and which maybe lag behind. But you know, there's a whole range of investment in the IRA to monitor and verify emissions reductions that are being supported from the act itself. That's particularly true in the land use, agriculture, and forestry sector, where Secretary Vilsack's deploying funds first from the CCC and now from the IRA to evaluate which strategies. We now have 80,000 farms, up from like a handful, who are using climate-smart practices across the country. But which practices really make a difference? Do they secure carbon over the long haul, et cetera? Those are important questions that need constant verification. And I think there's considerable interest that on the private sector and philanthropic side as well, to make sure that money is being deployed in the most cost-effective way possible. So in terms of the overall review, I would say probably with respect to the Inflation Reduction Act specifically, it's just beginning to take hold. So the review of all that will take some time. But I think there's no question that we're on the right trajectory. Just this month, for the first time, it became clear that the United States will generate more electricity from wind and solar than it does from coal-fired power. To give you some basis for comparison, when I ran the transition for President Obama, before I came back and worked for him in the White House, coal was 50% of generation capacity in the United States. Now, solar and wind have surpassed coal as a form of generation. And so if you take clean energy in total, it's pushing up now to 50% of generation. So I think that's a measure of success, but what's the cost effectiveness ratio in terms of cost for support or reduction. That remains to the province of academics, which we appreciate. Tell us what we're getting right, tell us what we're getting wrong, as well as to kind of federal agencies that will monitor and look at that.
So we're going to do one more question, stage left, and then move to the right side. Yes.
Hi, Ella Nilsson with CNN. Thanks so much for doing this event. John, you had said, talking about the IRA, feeling like it has sticking power and staying power. And certainly talking to some House Republicans, they're reticent to commit to repealing tax credits on manufacturing. Certainly they're seeing those benefits in their communities. But are there any other pieces of the IRA that you are concerned, if Republicans are in power, that could go consumer tax credits, any of the major grant programs? As you look, what are you concerned about?
Well, I think one of the things that we're attentive to is making sure that the promise of the bill is realized by ensuring that the availability of funds that were contained in the Inflation Reduction Act on the grant side are in fact awarded and obligated. And I think we're doing a good job on that, and we'll do. There's a bunch of money that is included in the bill that is unavailable until fiscal year 2025. But with all the money that's available in fiscal year 2024, we will have the lion's share of that, more than 90% of that awarded, and most of that 90% obligated by the end of the year. On the tax side, I think that there are that they will continue. I noticed they've already tried to repeal the provisions 42 times. I think there's a growing understanding that that's bad politics, not just bad policy. And so that was why that letter from the 18 House Republicans, I think, is meaningful. They're saying, don't get in the way of success and repeal those credits. So, whether they'll give up on that, I'm not sure. But I think in general terms, a different administration, we've seen the movie run before. So there's a lot of effort by the administration to power this movement towards a clean energy future that's in other areas other than just through the Inflation Reduction Act tax credits, regulatory side, with literally billions of tons of reductions at issue, which also has the effect of creating a cycle of innovation and investment in its own right. The procurement push by this administration on building materials, working with the states, et cetera. The global leadership that President Biden restored by appointing Secretary Kerry to lead the global negotiations, which has proved to be quite successful in 3 tops culminating in Dubai. All of that is on the ballot. There's no question about it. But I think particularly the Inflation Reduction Act's tax credits are very solid. I won't comment on Tesla's influence on the other side, so I'll leave that to others.
We'll also avoid talking about the Spaces interview last night in the same thing. In the back.
Thanks for putting this together. One of the great things about the IRA is it sort of recognizes that to meet this moment, we need to build things really, really fast, which is kind of a change for where environmental thinking and policy, has been previously. Curious about how the administration has thought about and acted on the need to move through the bureaucracy and get past the hand-wringers as quickly as possible to get this money out the door, and also about how you're thinking about engaging with Congress to update or change some of the rules and laws around permitting and the like to make sure we can keep moving quickly.
Well, I've already talked a little bit about the awards and paying extraordinary attention to that through my office, through the Natalie Quillian, the Deputy Chief of Staff's office, both on bipartisan infrastructure, not just both, on CHIPS and Science, bipartisan infrastructure law, and the Inflation Reduction Act. She and I are going through a series of meetings with cabinet secretaries right now saying, where are we? What do we need to get done before the end of the fiscal year? What do we need to get done before the end of the calendar year? And I think we're in very good shape on that. And I think we have actually just an excellent cabinet that's really paid extraordinary attention at the political level to making sure that the bureaucracy was responding to the promise of this. And obviously they've been out around the country extolling the benefits, but they've also been hands-on to make sure that those programs work, including through the Loan Program Office at the Department of Energy. On the permitting side, I think we've taken, there was bipartisan permitting reform, maybe think of it as a down payment that was part of the Fiscal Responsibility Act that passed in 2023. We have taken on board and implemented that law. We're using more the programmatic exclusions to move projects along faster. We've deployed $1 billion that was contained in the IRA to improve both the staffing and the technology. The Department of Energy is deploying a new suite of AI tools to increase the speed of permitting in matters that they, in their jurisdiction. So we're building those tools. We're doing what we have with the authorities that we have. And I think that we're taking full advantage of trying to ensure that the role that FIPSI has that looks at these large projects, that sets key timetables, is moving forward. We issued a regulation that gives the Secretary of Energy the capacity to set timeframes and stick to them on large-scale transmission projects, which was an authority that existed going back to the Bush administration but never implemented. And then we're working with our friends on Capitol Hill. They kind of put permitting reform off to the side for a while. It's come back. There's a bill pending that's come out of the Energy Committee in the Senate, and the House has some proposals floating around. We've been clear that we think that there's more work for Congress to do, particularly in improving the permitting of large-scale transmission, storage, and other projects. And we'll continue a dialogue with them as they wrap up this legislative session to see whether we can get something that everyone agrees to.
Yes, at the end.
Just a quick follow-up on that. I mean, is the White House going to... Sorry, Kelsey Bruger with E&D News. Thanks for doing this. Is the White House going to push lawmakers in Congress and on this particular proposal that has come back? Do you see this happening this Congress?
Look, this hasn't been the most productive Congress in the history of the Republic, but there are a bunch of things we like. There are some things that we think are problematic in the bill that passed out of the Energy Committee, and we'll continue to discuss that with them. But I think I think what everyone's anticipating is they'll come back in September. They probably won't get that much done. We'll kick this past the election, and then the real negotiating will happen in a lame duck session. So it's clear that as I like to say, we got really good at stopping things. We got to get really good at building things, and some additional legislative support would be helpful. But there are a couple things in that bill that we think are problematic, and we'll discuss that with the relevant parties in both the House and Senate.
And no one's gone broke betting against the efficiency of Congress, this year in particular. Other questions? Let's go to the second row in the middle.
Hi, Rachel reason with the Hill, to follow up on this discussion a little bit more, are some of those things you don't like, are they deal breakers? And, if this legislation, as proposed by Senators Manchin and Barrasso, does make it to President Biden's desk, will he sign it? Will he veto it?
I'm not negotiating in this room. I've talked to Senator Barrasso, I've talked to Senator Manchin, we'll continue to discuss where we think that we've provided technical assistance. There are a couple of things that we think really need to get cleaned up, and we'll continue to have those discussions, but we'll do it privately and try to get a good outcome.
So we'll go to this side of the room in the third row.
Hey, Tom Estorff with TMG. Just curious, you talked a little bit about the timeline. What are some of the big opportunities or priorities the Biden administration has for the remainder of the term?
Well, I think, we've got to finish some work on a couple of the key tax credits, particularly on clean hydrogen, which we mean to get done. We put out preliminary guidance on clean hydrogen. Some people loved it, some people didn't. It's maybe the most complex of the credits, technically and legally complex because of the standards there. But there are a few other tax credits that we want to move forward on. And I think that ensuring, as I noted, that we are able to deploy those grant resources that have been proving invaluable, particularly the ones, I mentioned this in my prepared remarks, but these projects that really empower states and local communities to build their own strategies on decarbonization, I think are really an exciting and kind of new feature of the Inflation Reduction Act. The other thing, we had a convening of faith leaders in the White House this morning. The other thing that is unique about the Inflation Reduction Act is this provision or this feature of the law that we refer to as direct pay, and for reasons that I can't completely explain, our colleagues at the Department of Treasury call it elected pay. It's the same thing, but most people refer to it as direct pay, which gives nonprofits, large nonprofit hospitals, churches, other large nonprofits that access to the tax credits directly. And one of the things we're doing in the course of this fall is making sure that people are aware of that they can take advantage of the provisions to, whether that's to install new geothermal heating thing or put rooftop solar or take advantage of the vehicle credits directly as a nonprofit. That's a large sector of the economy that never before had direct access to the support that was coming through the tax law. So we want to make sure that's available, but we want to make sure people know about that.
Yes, let's go to the second row right here, and then we'll...
And then more fusion breakthroughs before January 20th.
Great Tuesday. Willie Lyles III from Congressman Clyburn's office. Thank you for doing this.
Nice to see you.
You mentioned clean hydrogen tax credit being a priority to get done this year. Is the tax credit for existing nuclear also a priority to get done this year too?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that the support for the existing nuclear fleet is strong, and through a production tax credit that we'll finalize. There's also support through the new that go into effect in 2025, the technology neutral, which I think Third Way has really trumpeted, these technology neutral zero carbon energy production credits and investment tax credits. And those, I think, will be a huge game changer. Rhodium recently analyzed that they will cut emissions between now and 2035 by 4 to 500, I get that right? 4 to 500 megatons. And cut traditional pollution by 20%, so cleaning up communities, dealing with the public health aspects of that, and saving consumers more than $30 billion. So that's a very important new feature of the law. Those go into effect January 1. We'll be done with the guidance on those credits. Preliminary guidance is already out. So that's another, and that will affect particularly the new build nuclear, which we're also think is, has great potential, both in terms of new designs and small modular reactors, as well as just the overall need to build more firm, clean power across the country. Biggest debate that's changed over the course of this year is people pulling their hair out on data centers and AI and the load on the power system going up. And there's some reality to that. It's part and parcel of a change from what we've seen over the last 20 years, where electricity demand was basically flat as a result of improvement in efficiency. Economy's growing, but we're more efficiently using the power that we were generating, so demand was largely flat. Now it's going up. That's a combination of things, including the demands of data centers and artificial intelligence, but it also includes electrifying more in the built space, in transportation, et cetera. So we need to build a lot more generation capacity, but we need to do it clean. And we think that nuclear will play an important role in that regard as well.
And the combination of policies and tax credits are also helping take the Palisades plant in Michigan out of mothballs, and will actually be the first nuclear plant in the United States to be repowered, which is equally as important, particularly given growth and demand. So we have about 5 minutes left. We'll go to a question in the front row, the second.
Hi, Anna Kramer with Notice. I'm the energy and environment reporter. I'm seeing a lot about energy bills starting to go up as fossil retires and as we see some of the capacity prices really increase, especially PJM. We just saw that. And I'm wondering, it seems to me like there's kind of a huge political problem there if people's energy bills go up and they blame the energy transition for that. And I'm wondering, is there anything that can be done in the nearer term about this clean firm issue? The nuclear conversation we're having obviously is very long term.
Yeah, well, I think we saw record installments of solar in particular last year, and we're seeing the growth year on year even surpassing that. But we need more generation, and again, there's increase in demand. I don't know, I think that on the consumer side themselves, particularly the big users of power like data centers, AI, the big tech players, have a role to play in ensuring that demand gets built, and we need to do that in a way that's also attending to doing the other things we've sort of been talking about in this conversation, which is expanding the grid, reconductoring power lines, creating more capacity to move clean electrons to where they're needed. But we're closely following that and trying to improve and enhance the performance of the grid, across the board. And so you'll see, I think, regionally, this will be a little bit different story playing out in different places. But overall, as I noted, we need more power. It needs to be clean, and we need to get it to the consumers where it's necessary. So that argues for still more and more investment along the lines we've seen over the last 2 years.
So we're going to have to wrap up. John, I'm going to use moderator's prerogative and close with this question. We've heard a lot about what the government is doing and what it can do. But if we're going to lean into government-enabled but private sector-led, is there anything or a small set of things that we need to see more of from the private sector to ensure the certainty and continuation of these policies that we keep hearing they need?
Well, look, I think I noted this at the end of my remarks. They need to tell their own stories, particularly to their local elected officials about why that 10 years of certainty matters, what kind of projects are being built, where are there bumps in the road that need to get fixed, but mostly how do you continue that march towards making the commitments they themselves have made to clean up their emissions, clean up their processes, make the investments that are going to be good for the country. And you're seeing that happen, I think, again, across every sector of the economy. But they need to shout that from the rooftops a little bit so that we get away from, we get back to what the professor noted, which is evidence-based, science-based, decent policy making that's going to produce strong growth, good jobs, and lower prices for the American consumers.
Well, we're going to leave it at that. Thank you very much for joining us today. We're thrilled to celebrate the second anniversary of the Inflation Reduction Act.
Thanks very much.
And thank all of you for joining us. Really appreciate it.